Hey, good afternoon. It's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. A bit of a wet afternoon on the farm here, which makes it a good day for talking about black spot. Black spot is this stuff here. You've seen it in your garden already. It's black splotches on the foliage of the rose, and usually yellow regions as well. And you can see on the rose behind me here that it's affected more on the lower and older leaves of the rose. You can see some yellow and some black back there, whereas the upper leaves are still relatively unaffected. That's kind of the pattern that it shows on these roses. And the name of the game here right now, at this stage in the season, is to try to prevent the reinfection from the lower foliage to move up to the upper foliage of the rose here. So can you keep black spot out of your garden? The answer is kind of no. The black spot fungus, Diplocarpon rosei, is ubiquitous. It's everywhere where roses are, and it travels on the wind. So at some point in your season, your susceptible varieties will get black spot, and your only control over it is to try to either reduce it or reduce the severity of the infection, and then clean it up afterwards so it doesn't spread back and through your garden. So let me show you how to do that. So once you have this infected tissue on your rose, the name of the game is removal. And I've seen people trying to do this by using snippers like this. That's a pretty inefficient way of stripping the leaves from your rose. The better way, every leaf has an abscission point where if you pull back and downwards on the stem, it just detaches, and that way it comes off quickly and cleanly, so you don't leave any of that black spot in behind. The way this actually works is that each one of these leaves, that's the mature stage of the fungus, once it sporulates and sends spores around, it requires moisture for the spores to germinate. And what I heard was that 7 hours of moisture is what it takes. So needless to say, those people who live in a more arid climate and their foliage will dry off quicker after an irrigation have an advantage in the prevention of black spot reinfecting their plants. Something that you can do in terms of trying to make it a little easier for your rose to dry out is to prune with this in mind, is to remove the branches that grow to the inside of the rose and try to leave an open air circulation into the rose. Here at the base of the rose, the same logic applies, that if these leaves that have fallen from the rose begin to sporulate and throw those black spot spores back up into the rose, you're going to get reinfected very quickly. So it's important that when you're finished cleaning up your rose, and this is particularly important post-season, like when your roses are going to sleep for the winter or fall, that you take all of this old foliage, the infected foliage, and you get it out of here. You clean it up thoroughly, and there's some evidence that if you can put down a coarse organic mulch like wood chips at the base of your rose and keep that freshened up after the cleanup, that will suppress the black spot fungus from jumping back up into your rose. Okay, so it's all well and good to talk about how to try to clean up your roses and prevent subsequent reinfection of black spot, but you may be asking at this point, isn't there something I could do? Isn't there something I could spray perhaps that would prevent the black spot from appearing at all in my garden? And my answer to that is, I guess it depends on how serious you are about the problem. I tend to view black spot here as more of a cosmetic issue. It doesn't cause any major health effects to my roses, even though I'm in a climate that is a little bit moisture, and I will see some appearance of black spot on almost all of my roses throughout the year. So I don't view it as a major problem. You can see in the rose behind me, it's got plenty of new growth coming. I'm going to get plenty of new flowers from it because it's a strong, vigorous rose, and the black spot will just be a cosmetic annoyance to me. However, If you are pretty serious about it, let's say you're trying to enter your roses in exhibitions and you really need to eliminate black spot from your garden, and you're serious enough to consider the heavy-duty fungicides and rotate through 3 or 4 of the most major chemical fungicides, then I say have at her. Go ahead and strap on your respirator, put on your spray suit and your heavy-duty sprayer, and you know, have fun, but be safe. For me, it's not worth that level of effort. However, I will talk to you about 4 of the more natural alternatives that are on the market. And by natural, I don't mean to say they are without risks entirely, but they have a widespread history of use that is considered relatively safe and effective. So the first one is copper. Now, copper is generally applied in one of 2 different ways. One, as a winter mix of Bordeaux mix. So this is after all your foliage has come off of your rose. You've stripped it off, you've done your cleanup of those fallen leaves around the base. Maybe you've put down your wood mulch, and you want to make sure your roses come into the season clean, that they aren't carrying too many of those spores from season to season. Then you can spray it with Bordeaux mix. Now, Bordeaux mix is like a copper and lime solution that sticks to the leaves, sticks to the stems. It can be slightly phytotoxic, which is why we put it onto the rose during the winter. Phytotoxic meaning that it could burn the leaves or cause some problems that way. So that's the first way you would apply copper. The second one tend to be called just copper spray, and it doesn't include it isn't as heavy, and it doesn't include that lime component. It doesn't stick to your foliage quite so strongly, and it doesn't cause any phytotoxicity. So copper spray is a second one, and that one you could carry over, not just over the winter season, but well into the spring. The second option I'm going to talk about is sulfur, or wettable sulfur. And wettable sulfur is being used by humans to suppress fungal infections on crops for thousands of years. So it has a long history of use. Wettable sulfur, you would put it as directed on the package into a mix of water, and you would get a full coverage spray up and down on your roses. Now, the caution about sulfur is that as it gets warmer, like past 25 degrees Celsius, I'll put in the Fahrenheit equivalent when I edit the video, then it can become phytotoxic again to the roses. So it's again spring, early summer, not in the height of the heat of summer. The third option I'm going to talk about is neem. And neem is like an extract of a bark of the neem tree, and it is also known for suppressing fungal diseases and insects to some degree as well. So it might be generally a good thing to apply to your roses, but once again, the caution is that it can be phytotoxic in high temperatures. So neem is another of those shoulder season, spring and fall type solutions. And the final one I'm going to talk about, and it's the one that I've mixed in this sprayer here, is generally safe and effective. It's a baking soda and horticultural oil mix. Now, the baking soda I'm using in here is not sodium bicarbonate, it's potassium bicarbonate, which can be a little harder to find. I've put a link to it in my Amazon store, not that you have to buy it there, but just to give you an idea of which the ingredient is. So potassium bicarbonate and horticultural oil with just a couple of drops of dish soap or a spreader sticker to make it stick onto the foliage of your leaves. The actual recipe for that is that you use a teaspoon of the potassium bicarbonate. You can substitute with sodium bicarbonate, but it tends to be a little more phytotoxic. The potassium bicarbonate, 1 teaspoon, and half a teaspoon of horticultural oil with just a couple of droplets of the spreader sticker or the dish soap into 1 liter or 1 quart of water. From there, you put it into a sprayer like this, and you give it a full coverage spray, right, to drip off onto the stripped foliage or stripped branches, onto the new foliage, up and down the shrub. And it has, some people have questioned whether this is effective as a spray. And I did some reading on it, but also I've been using it in my garden off and on. And I guess my general impression is that it is safe and effective. That now it's not going to cure the black spots. I don't think there's anything that you're going to spray on that's actually going to get rid of black spots. That's only by manual removal, but it will, in my opinion, reduce the reincidence of infection. So if you're coming into your season, maybe a good way to go about it if you're looking at these less harmful solutions is to do a strip down at the end of the season to strip off the old foliage. do a cleanup around the base, put down a bark mulch, do a winter spray of Bordeaux mix, enter into the season either doing copper or neem oil sprays, and then when it gets to the height of the season like this, doing a weekly or bi-weekly spray of that baking soda solution that I talked about might be a good way to reduce the black spot on your roses. All right, I hope this answered some of your questions on black spot on roses. If you have any questions, comments, or just want to generally rant about how terrible it is, leave those in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.